Speaking of turds, Vice laid one this past week. Yeah, they did the documentary on Chyna, the wrestler, not the country. And I've got to be honest, they accomplished something that I didn't think was possible. They made me feel sorry for Chyna. They made what I mean, we can talk about the quality of the documentary and or the people that were doing it, and I don't even actually know who completely finished this thing. As we'll mention, it's screwy. The whole thing is screwy, but the way they did it was they juxtaposed, how's that word, recent video from 2015 and 2016 when this sleazeball manager guy had brought Chyna back from Japan, where she'd been living for a few years, with the happily, apparently, the only time she actually got some peace and fucking quiet in this sleazeball, this greasy, grimy, grubby individual, as Terry Funk would say, brings her back under the premise of shooting a documentary, the what was it, not the resurrection, but the restoration or the reconstruction of Chyna. And gets this film crew, who then you think the film crew is going to be the baby faces and the manager's going to be the heel, but then find out everybody's a fucking heel. But they juxtaposed footage from that time period when they were following Chyna around with a camera, then with footage of her from the time she was young and started training and etc. And they would go back and forth between the historic footage and the more modern footage until finally all the footage met at the end. And obviously you found out what happened to her, which everybody knew to begin with, but you had no idea that all of these shyster, crooked, weird individuals could come together around this poor woman. I got to say, this poor woman, they couldn't leave her a fucking alone. And every single one of them had a fucking mental problem, starting with some of the people she was dealing with in the wrestling business. But you know, I was never a fan of Chyna as a wrestler, because I'll say this, and I'm going to say a bunch of good things about her and how sorry I felt for her in this whole thing, but her work was the shits. She was not a good worker. And that's why I wasn't a fan. I was a fan remember when at the opening part of this thing, they showed her debut. It was in Nashville at a Raw when she came in the ring and snatched Marlena, Terry Runnels, up in that reverse bear hug and started shaking her. And fuck, that was impressive. That was impactful. I remember being there that night, and we got something here. And Marlena was perfect one for it, because she's 5 feet tall, Terry is, and Chyna was huge compared to her. But that was the way that Chyna had most impact and how she should have been used. The bodyguard, the corner person, make an impact with something. Get out. Get in, make an impact, and get out. Don't stay too long. Don't try to work, and don't speak. It's the look, and it's the way you use the tool in the corner. She had two of the best workers in the business, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and to do the work, but she completed the package. And so in that aspect, she was tremendously valuable, but where they completely lost the plot, and we'll find out why in a minute, especially with guess who, Shitstain's back, and they started making her a wrestler. That's when she could have better matches with guys than she could with girls, because guys were strong enough to move her around. Guys were probably more experienced to begin with. The guys at that time, probably better workers in the WWF to begin with. But they were strong enough to move her around. That's why a lot of girls, when they're having tryout matches in some of these indies, they want to work with guys because they look better. The guys could move her around. The guys could fucking base forward. The girls were at the mercy of, then it was going to be Chyna's match, because what are they going to do with her, right? That she don't want to or can't participate in. But then that becomes ridiculous, as we'll see here later on. Anyway, they started out the talking heads. Mick Foley loved her because Mick's the nicest human being in the world.
The nicest. You know what? You always say that, and everyone I know who is friends with him or knows him says that, and I always think that, but sometimes I don't know, I shouldn't say I never don't think that, but when you see something like this, it's like, my God, he's the most decent guy in the whole wrestling business.
Yeah, it's not a work. And he loved her as a person, Billy Gunn was on there acting like she could work. I don't know why. But then Shitstain is all over this piece because he claimed to be a great friend of hers when he could latch on to her in the final days as ratings for his podcast. And of course he loved the gimmick. That's the kind of gimmick that he would love. Is basically he didn't care about her wrestling, whether it was any good or not, because he didn't care whether anybody's wrestling was good or not. He saw a gimmick and a look and something different and edgy, a woman that looks like that we can push. And because she, as was mentioned in the program, she didn't have any idea how the wrestling business worked. She saw it on TV one day and told her sister, I'm going to do this. And within months, she was at Killer Kowalski's school. And within a year, because of her look, that's when she got the spot. Because obviously, Kowalski trained Triple H. Kowalski trained her. They all lived in the same state, part of the country.
Same hometown.
Well, there you go. And it wasn't that I don't feel like I need to clarify this, but I will. Just based on the program, it wasn't that Triple H and Shawn Michaels had this idea to bring a trailblazing woman in to empower, women around the world with her feminine mystique or whatever. They loved the picture, the video, the visual that you got of her with them. What a fucking gimmick. What a look. It was preposterous having a female bodyguard of male wrestlers. But when she looked like that, nobody took her seriously as their bodyguard. They didn't need a body. Well, maybe Michaels. He goes out in fucking Syracuse, needs a bodyguard. But the heat from the heels and the preposterousness, the preposterosity, the whole thing came that they were saying she was their bodyguard. And it was just a look to put together, and it was meant to get them over. And then Triple H and Chyna became an item after that, but I remember specifically Vince McMahon saying that Triple H and Shawn wanted to do this, and it was their thing, the bodyguard. Okay, well, that wasn't ridiculous on the face of it because of the reasons I just mentioned. It's the package. It's the look. It's the gimmick. She's not really supposed to be the bodyguard, but the good thing was that people forget back then, even in the Attitude Era, you couldn't have guys on WWF television suplexing and slamming and beating up women. So this was a tool that they could use, especially Shitstain, Mr. Russo, just in case anybody out there doesn't realize, I'll say his given name once. He could have more cat fights and girl action, which is what he was all into. And I mentioned this before. If you need any other fucking evidence as to whether Russo was over the moon about, I'm sorry, I said it twice. Shitstain was over the moon about not only Sable, but Chyna. Two people that just wanted to be stars thought that he knew he was an expert on wrestling because they knew nothing. And so they listened to him because he was pushing them. And then he feels some ownership of their fame and success because, oh, yeah, I did all of that. So naturally, and after the fact, when he figures he can latch on to a tragic story and a sympathetic figure, he's going to do that too. But anyway, that's where it all was. Michaels and Helmsley wanted the look, the package, this, fucking beast of a woman as our bodyguard. Shitstain himself said she was, I quote, stunning. Stunning. You could use a lot of even positive adjectives or hyperbole or whatever, but stunning, I don't know, was one for Chyna. And then early on in the program, right in the cold open of the whole thing where they were setting it up, the quote comes from Chyna. She saw herself as Wonder Woman all of a sudden, which was another part of the problem. They take this girl, and when you go back and they talked about her childhood, and she was always wanting to be accepted and always wanting to fit in somewhere or do something. Then she got obsessive or addictive or whatever with the bodybuilding. And then she's wanting to be a TV star. And, she wanted to be famous. She had low self-esteem. That can fuck your head up already. Then you get some idiot like Shitstain who didn't know how the business worked himself, so he didn't know how to talk to people, and he's pushing her and blowing smoke up her ass, as they say. So he makes her believe that she's Wonder Woman, and now she thinks she's Wonder Woman. And that's what led to then her thinking that she was on a level with Steve Austin. I got more sympathy for her. I always just thought she's another one of these fucking Sable lunatics and all these other lunatics, men or women. They just want to get in the business. They ain't any good at it, and they don't care. They just want to be stars of something. TV stars, movie stars, whatever. But she had a lot of people trying to talk her into this too, that she really was, and she was not mentally equipped to separate the fact from fiction, or the gimmick from reality, or the hyperbole from real life. And, that caused more damage. So Anthony Alzado is this slimeball manager. And apparently this
spiritual advisor.
And spiritual advisor, I mean, just a complete scuzz. And we find out later on the footage of all the documentary stuff they shot was reclaimed and made into this documentary through no fault, or I guess we should, through no fault or no help from the manager or the filmmakers. The shyster the first thing I said when they interviewed the filmmakers, the director and the video guy, I wrote, who are these shyster fucking filmmakers? I've seen classier looking German Goo Girls film crews. And just scuzzy people all around.
Imagine if the Vice crew lost their clothing budget. That's what you would get here.
Oh my God. And basically, and by the way, folks, this was not our fine friends at Dark Side of the Ring, Jason Husney or Evan Husney. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you don't even know their names. Yeah. You're fine friends.
I conflated the two. Evan Husney and Jason Eisner. They didn't do this. They weren't responsible for this.
Although I'm going to say, you say not responsible for this. I actually thought it was an incredibly well done documentary. I thought it was really well done. If we're just talking about the filmmaking, and if we can envision, because we're never told directly how the footage got into the final hands of the filmmakers. Yeah. But if we can envision that they're just recovering this footage that is, if the little bits we saw are an example of how frantic and nutty the overall canon of it was, that was a lot to go through, and putting together her whole life story with good little sound bites, not too much from anyone, but I was surprised Triple H was in there. But I actually think this was...
that was... there was an old clip, but there was some new stuff also.
There was something with him at his desk or something, yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought this was an incredibly well-done documentary, and we'll talk about it later, but like you, I came out of it seeing her a very different way.
Well, I mean, the documentary footage they showed, the first, and that's what you mentioned, it was a well-done documentary, but I don't want to conflate the filmmakers that we're talking about that are seen in this film with the guys at Dark Side of the Ring or whoever finished this product. There's all kinds of people that had a hand in this. And the filmmakers that are on camera in this are sleazeballs. The first question that they asked when they got her back from Japan was, do you think coming back will trigger some of your bad habits? And she said, oh, no. And they asked her, are you on anything? Are you on Xanax? And she says, no Xanax, just Halcyon and Rohypnol. I didn't know they still made Halcyon. How was she walking around at that point? And the manager claimed that the clear directive was to get her out on the Comic-Con circuit, get her out everywhere, get her signing autographs. He even said backyard wrestling brawls. Book her anywhere.
Whatever that is. Yeah.
Yes, whatever that is, and wherever you get booked in those things. He didn't even know anything about the wrestling business. He's trying to be Chyna's manager. And while the filmmakers are saying, no, we thought the priority was the documentary that we're shooting. But this fucking manager, Anthony, is no Barry Bloom.
See, that's a big part of the documentary, let's just say it. And luckily, they don't go too deep into it that it becomes too big of a side topic, but it always leaves you wondering. So these two guys are making the documentary. He's Chyna's manager. He's treating the documentary like it's his documentary about the recovery of Chyna.
Yeah.
Now he's doing it, and then they all start fighting, and who knows what happens, but what? What a weird scenario when you watch this, and the guy's clearly directing them and picking all the scenes that are going to happen. So you have two conflicting things from the beginning, and she's landing right in the middle of this.
And then they went back to the 1995 training footage. And as I mentioned, they established she already had image issues. And then she gets into show business, which is the worst thing in the world. She needed confidence and acceptance and wanted to be a star and gets into show business that can fuck normal people's minds up. And, what is, if you're obsessive about something like bodybuilding, or you're obsessive about something like being famous, then you can be obsessive about something like drugs or alcohol or whatever. And as I mentioned, she saw wrestling on TV and said, well, I'm going to do this. So she never got years of watching it to know what it was supposed to look like and how fans thought and what they liked and how wrestling worked. You can always tell guys and girls who never watched it versus ones who did, because the ones who were fans and who actually watched the product understood it better at the start. But anyway, the manager, did you see when they took her to the comic convention? The manager had put out a sloppily Sharpie handwritten price list, and topless pictures were $20 more than regular pictures autographed. And okay, obviously that may be what a lot of people might want, the topless picture more than that. But when you've got a woman that's already been through all the shit, because this is 2015, rehab and drugs and problems and porn and all this stuff, and now just dragging her out like that. Mick Foley could tell that she didn't need to be involved in this. You saw Mick coming up and giving her a hug, hadn't seen her in ages. How long ago was that shot? Mick had a long hair and a dark, full beard.
Yeah.
He did not look like gray Santa Claus like he's looked lately.
It was definitely shot a while ago, because Sean Waltman, I noticed, looked a little different than he looks now. But with the manager, the other interesting thing is he's so sleazy. I mean, he exudes sleaziness, and then he just keeps doing sleazy things and putting her in sleazy scenarios where you question everything he's doing, even when the other side are these like degenerate, irresponsible junkies. Like, you're rooting for them against him in a way. But the interesting thing is you see all of his behavior. You have all this footage, and he still agreed to sit down and be a talking head. He thinks he comes out of this looking well. That's what's nuts.
Yes, you can tell he did. He was like, but here's another guy just wants to be on fucking TV. And speaking of people who want to be on TV, Shitstain was back with the footage of her on his podcast, but the quote from Shitstain, I wrote it down. I've seen the wrestling business destroy the lives of dozens and dozens of people. I could have been one of them. It's a cold and heartless business. What a fucking drama queen he is. I could have been one of, my business was almost, the life was almost destroyed by the wrestling business. And he puts that in his books. The only person to ever write books without ever actually reading one. I got news for you, you fucking limp-dicked piece of shit. Just as a side note, if you think you've had any stress or problems or fucking strife in the wrestling business, you should have worked anybody's territory. You wouldn't have made it 15 fucking days, 15 minutes. Fuck. Destroyed the lives of dozens and dozens. It could have been me. I could have been one of them. Then why didn't you help her instead of fucking pushing her over the goddamn cliff? Anyway, as a matter of fact, you know the story with me and Russo, that was over Chyna's match. That one time we had the thing in the hallway and he went to Vince on me.
It was Chyna against who?
I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Because we had a Monday Night Raw, 2 hours long. There were 8 matches. We did the production meeting, and 6 of the matches were going to end in disqualification. And I'm shaking my head already, right? So I'm one of the agents, and whatever matches I had, and not only Raw matches, but we did other stuff that night. So I'm flittering around. And by the way, I was never an agent for Chyna for any of her matches because I was never an agent for anything involving Michaels and Helmsley because Vince already knew how I felt about them after the curtain call. So I was relieved from having anything. It was always either Jack Lanza or Pat Patterson if it was a pay-per-view or whatever. So I never had to fucking work with that group as the agent, and I was happy with that. I was over with the guys that were more serious about the wrestling business and not being divas or prima donnas. But one of the production assistants comes up because I've got the Raw format and I'm working off of it. And if there's any changes, you're supposed to be told. And they've changed the finish. What? In Chyna's match with one of the girls. It was a match with a girl. And what is it? No, because something happened. She was going to lose. There was going to be some fucking business. I think she was going to lose it. They changed it to a DQ. I said, what? Yeah, Triple H went in and talked to Russo. Oh, God damn it. So I go and I find Russo in the hallway. I said, Vince, I said, you just made another one, a DQ. Now we've got 7 DQs out of 8 matches on this program. And it wasn't even who was in it. It was just the idea of that's ridiculous, right? It's just garbage, lazy booking. And he looked at me when I said, we've got 7 out of 8 DQs now. Do we need to do this? He said, DQ, schmeq, nobody cares, and turned around like he was going to walk off from me.
That is hysterical.
Swear that's a quote. I swear it's a quote. And now, see, here's the thing. I had gone over to him in the corner, in the hall, in the arena. People are walking around, but we're having a quiet discussion. Well, I said, we got 7 DQs. And it's loudly and with a look on his face and like he knows something about wrestling that I don't, which is goddamn ridiculous. And this DQ, schmeq, nobody cares, and starts to walk away. And that's when I said, well, I tell you what, motherfucker. You're going to care in about a year and a half when you're back running a fucking video store because you put this whole place out of business. And all the boys heard that. And instead of coming back and getting in my face and asking me if I wanted to say anything further, or could we settle this, or do we need to go out in the parking lot, or I'm sorry, or boo to a goose, or anything, he just puts his fucking tail between his legs and slinks off down the hallway and goes to Vince's office and says, Vince, Cornette was yelling at me and talking down to me in front of the boys. So then Vince goes and gets JR. Says, JR, go find out why Cornette's talking down to Vince Russo and yelling at him in front of the boys. So JR, a few minutes later, comes up to me. What are you doing talking and yelling at Vince Russo in front of the boys? I said, I'll tell you exactly what happened. And I told him exactly what was said and everything I just said to you. I said, we were talking quiet. He decides to bow up at me. I'm not going to fucking take it. He's a piece of shit. If he's got anything to say to me, he can say it to me personally. But that's why it happened, and I'm not apologizing to anybody. And JR goes back and tells Vince McMahon, yeah, Cornette was fucking registering his consternation that we had 7 DQs on the program, and Vince got loud and Cornette got louder. And Vince McMahon believed that, and that was the last I heard of it. But it like fucking DQ, schmeq, nobody cared. And by the way, I was off by 9 months. 9 months. And Vince, because I said in a year and a half or 2 years or whatever, and it was 2 years and like 9 months, Vince Russo was back running a video store in Atlanta after he had put WCW out of business. Anyway, so nevertheless, the point is she got the spot as the bodyguard. They liked the visual. Triple H and Chyna, start their affair. Shitstain bops in to take more credit for inventing DX. And they showed some clips of basically it was a trash TV era. That's what Shitstain wanted. Vince was liking the ratings, so they did trash TV. And at that point in after the DX thing runs, they start in the documentary talking about how she became a single again and started having the surgery done and to look more feminine. And I've told that story before. I'm not going to do it here about the dental surgery story. But when I had to cancel one of her third-party appearances because they said she's having dental surgery, and I called a promoter, said she can't come, she's having dental surgery, let's get you a replacement. And then they called mad at me because I spilled the tea. Brian. About the dental surgery. I said, who fucking kayfabes a root canal? And no, she's having her jaw reconstructed so she doesn't look like Antonio Inoki. I said, well, maybe if somebody had told me that to begin with, I wouldn't have fucking spread it around. And that's why she was mad at me and I wasn't real happy with her anyway. Shitstain says, well, you can't have an intergender match if it's not believable. The irony of I don't know where to begin. Not only the fact that he's exclaiming that anything in wrestling should be believable when he's never been involved in or responsible for anything that anybody did believe, or whether that an intergender match on the face of it should be believable at all, because how can it be believable? Anyway, and the famous $200,000 guitar shot where she won the Intercontinental title from Jeff Jarrett, and Jeff Jarrett took home $200,000 in cash and prizes for his participation. Now, by the way, was there one clip shown on this program of even the stuff, the match in Japan with Chyna and Chono? See, that's why
I had never seen that before.
The match in Japan with Chyna and Chono, that's tough to say, but
I had never seen that before. That was something.
Well, that's when Inoki was always looking for freak show gimmicks. For 40 years, that was his thing. Freak show gimmicks, mixed martial arts matches, do all this crazy shit. He fell in love with the gimmick of Chyna and brought her over there for 2 years to tried to push her. And as I recall, it was not during a golden period for his company's business. And that was when he was still involved with New Japan. But none of these clips gives any indication. This is the question I was going to ask you. Did you see one thing that was shown even in highlight where it looked like she knew how to work?
No, they showed that she knew how to work stiff. Not that she knew how to work so that she wasn't hurting someone.
It was just sloppy and the guy was standing there waiting on it. You can work stiff and still work good. This was bad stiff work. But by 2000 or whatever, she had bought the gimmick. This was a quote, a strong, powerful woman who holds her own in a male-dominated industry. That's what the fans were supposed to think. That's the description of her gimmick. That's not what she was supposed to think. Because she was not a strong, powerful woman holding her own in a male-dominated industry. She was still a very green performer being pushed, in some cases, above her level by the guys running the business.
Hey, let me ask you something. Obviously, I don't know where you're going to go with your review, but I think you'll probably find it maybe the same way I did. She comes across as a very sympathetic figure, someone who you feel for by the end of this. Yeah. But beyond that, when you're talking about getting into the business, reasons for getting into the business, and then for whatever reason, good or bad at times, it goes to your own head where you start believing the hype and all of a sudden it's your vision of what you're supposed to be. A lot of similarities between Chyna and the Warrior?
Yes, and Sable. And if you notice, how did each one of them end their relationship, a couple of times, with the WWF? Wanting the biggest contract in the company, wanting to be pushed as the top star. If it was a woman, wanting to be on an equal basis with Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock. There weren't even any men that could be on that equal basis. People who did not have any knowledge of the wrestling business at all, even as fans, then didn't have any knowledge of it when they got in it, didn't understand it, were pushed to the moon by a big promotion with a promotional machine, began believing their own shit, even though they were stunningly underqualified as performers and were handheld all through it by experienced people, and then wanted to go on to make movies and or make the biggest money contract in the company. All of those people, they all shared those traits. They could have built the women's division around Chyna when they were trying to make her. Vince didn't want her wrestling guys because he spends so much time and effort back in those days trying to get guys over. Jeff Jarrett got beat by a girl because he was getting $200,000 in a lump sum and leaving to go to another fucking company.
To go back to Russo,
yeah. But other guys, no. Yes, the preliminary guys, they'll do it, whatever. But when you got to the top guys, they weren't going to fucking do a job for her. Vince was not going to let a woman beat his top male talent that he had spent time and money and effort in, but they would have built the women's division around her. But she wanted to work with not just the guys, but the top guys and be paid the same. And they couldn't beat her all the time. And that's what they would have had been doing. So, and then the timing on all this was the timeline in the documentary. You weren't sure what happened which, but Triple H broke her heart, quote unquote, dumped her for Stephanie. And then, that was around the time they started having her work more with women again, which she felt was a step backwards. And that's what she would have been doing for the next several years, working with women and making a lot of money doing it. But instead they had, and I'm not knocking Chyna in this. The only knocking of Chyna I'm doing in this whole thing is saying she was not a good wrestler. She was not a good worker. She was not a good performer. She couldn't talk. She couldn't work. She had a great look. That's not her fault. It's fault of the people that pushed her and led her to believe that she was qualified more than she was, because everybody could see that spent any time around her that she was impressionable and had poor self-image and whatever the fuck. So they were building her up for this. But then Jim Ross confirmed it. And I mean, it's not like this was a secret at the time. They let Chyna go, not because Stephanie wanted her out of the picture, but because she wanted $1 million a year contract guaranteed, and she wanted to be used on the same level as Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that was not going to fucking take place. And then Shitstain comes in and says, that's just excuses by the WWE. She had no ego. Well, fuck. Of course she had an ego. You gave it to her. Where did she come across the mistaken idea that she was as big a star as Stone Cold Steve Austin? All y'all pumping up an easily led person.
The documentary made it seem like, and it's always kind of been the story, Triple H and Stephanie got put together in storyline, and then they fell in love. And happily ever after, they inherited a lot of money from a big sale, but we'll get to that at a later time. Chyna, and I'd heard this before, said here that she had found a love note from Stephanie. I can't believe she's writing love notes to Triple H. I
heard the same thing 20 years ago.
I would love to see what that was, but she found that and was dated a year earlier. Yeah. Is there a chance, I mean, you were there, Triple H and Stephanie getting put together in storyline, was that in any way a cover for the fact that they were secretly hooking up already?
I can't say which came first, the chicken or the egg, the cart or the horse. I don't know. I was shocked when I heard that there was an actual legitimate relationship going on between Stephanie and any wrestler.
You were shocked Vince would allow it.
Yes, and I remain shocked to this day. I wouldn't figure that Vince McMahon would allow anything that fucking Danny Davis wouldn't allow. And Danny Davis had a couple of daughters, and I've watched a couple of fucking wrestlers actually tried to go out with him, and it didn't end well. But yeah, I don't know. I can't say. Because I wasn't riding around in the car with him, or it wasn't my week to watch him. But it was going on for quite a while before Chyna found out about it. We do know that much. And then, so she wants the $1 million and they ain't going to give it to her. And she's getting shit stain says, oh, excuses. No, it was a reported fucking fact at the time. But you know what? Here's the thing. When old shit stain said that when she left, she had to change her name because they owned Chyna. So she became Chyna Doll. Remember, for that little while. And shit stains acted like, well, we could have let her use it. We could have let her use the name, but that was up to Vince. To quote the British Bulldog, he wasn't even there. Shitstain had been gone for a year and a half. So he was just conflating like I was still in the WWE. We could have done it, but it came down to Vince. Yeah, no shit, it came down to Vince, and you weren't even involved. You lying sack of shit. I know there's been a lot of great historians. There's the presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. There's the Ken Burns, the great documentary historian. But I think Shitstain's the only person I've ever seen that was a specialist in rewriting historians.
Well, no, there's a whole wing of that amongst wrestling historians. There's the Hulk Hogan wing. I mean, Hulk Hogan's the leader of that wing, actually.
Anyway, she got involved with X-Pac for a while. Even Kevin Nash said they weren't good for each other. Even I think X-Pac said they weren't good for each other. The Japanese thing, that's what I was at OVW and we'd read the news and oh my God. And at the time I was thinking, boy, Japanese wrestling has really fallen from the golden era. But
yeah, Baba's death really did change everything.
It did. And Inoki was getting older and went for like I said, the freak show stuff and the weird gimmicks and the mixed martial arts crossovers that didn't really work. But there was a lot of Chono. It was nice they had Chono. And he even said, hey, a lot of the guys were against this at first. Of course, in Japan, can you imagine? Even Antonio Inoki, as much as he's respected by the talent over there at that point, we're going to bring in this girl and we're going to put her over a bunch of you guys. Fucking in Japan, I can imagine 20 years ago how they thought. But if you notice, Chono even never, he spoke about it like it was still a fight. And never actually came. He never said it was real, but he never said it wasn't. And he used his words very carefully. And he was proud of what they had done at the end, right? And of course, he didn't lose because it was Chono. Back to, I don't know. Some of this was modern time. Some of it wasn't. The manager at one time knew that she was binging, but it wasn't affecting her work. When he had her back for the documentary shoot and all the autograph sessions, her sister got her to go to rehab for 15 minutes, and then she turned around and walked out, and that's the last time she ever saw her sister. Then the director, then we start in the second half of the thing, then the documentary crew starts showing their true colors. The director says, boy, I just wanted to do some pills with Chyna. Because I just wanted to do some drugs with her. And then we find out the director of the supposed documentary is doing heroin and meth. He's on fucking heroin while he's doing the documentary. And they go through all of her shit. She was on The Surreal Life. She boxed Joey Buttafuoco. She was on Fear Factor. She does porn with Vivid, my old friend Steve Hirsch. And then Celebrity Rehab. And it's a fucking train wreck. And then they have Dr. Drew on there saying that she had, 100% sure if anybody has the problems that she has, they had childhood trauma. And then they cut to her mother who says, oh, yeah, she was a happy child, a playful girl, but my husband was an alcoholic and he stabbed me at one point with a butcher knife. What the fuck? It starts to become a rib. The sister says the mother was dysfunctional. Chyna goes to live with her alcoholic father that stabbed and drug addict father that stabbed her mother with a butcher knife when she's 16 years old and never sees her mother again. I'm had to keep notes on these relationships. The manager tries to supposedly get her to reconcile with her family, and it shows her going to her father's grave at the manager's insistence for the documentary shoot, which everybody says made her worse. So finally, in 2011, she moves to Japan and she becomes a school teacher and she has a normal life and she becomes a Mormon. I didn't even know you could become a Mormon in Japan. I thought you had to go to Utah to become a Mormon. But for the first time in this girl's life, she's actually doing normal things and they showed the Mormon family, and boy, they looked as Mormon as they could get. There was like 18 kids, but you figure there's no drugs involved. It's Japan. You can't get drugs in that country.
Although Sean Waltman did say he went to Japan with her. He had all the coke and all the pills and everything. Well, he got it in.
Damn it.
Paul McCartney couldn't, but X-Pac could.
But anyway, so she's there and she's normal. And then she finally calls her mother from Japan after 30 years and speaks to her on the phone. Her mother had said she had always wanted to get back with her, but hadn't been able to find her. She couldn't find her when she was on national TV every Monday night. I find that hard to believe. But then her mother, she was like, well, what am I going to do if I come home instead of staying here? What am I going to do? And her mom says, well, flip burgers, do anything. What the fuck? So then they showed the footage of her and the scummy manager getting kicked out of the lobby at Titan Tower when they tried to go ambush Vince or whoever.
Yeah, how does anyone think that would ever work out? I mean, that's where it becomes really sleazy. That's something done just for this documentary, which the manager's trying to take over. And then we, of course, like you said, find out the crew isn't just on heroin, but correct me if I'm wrong, one after another, they get into relationships with her.
Well, yeah, I was going there next. And by the way, the manager can be forgiven for not knowing how things work at Titan Tower since he'd never been there before and didn't know a goddamn thing about wrestling, just trying to manage a wrestler. But Chyna should have had to know that she was not going to get past the goddamn elevator. But then the crew guy that was doing the video, he's up next. He's a fucking Looney Tune. And he apparently lived with her for 3 months in California. And now he's knocking the manager. And Dr. Drew was rolling his eyes at the whole deal. And then they have a phone call with the manager and Chyna talking to Dr. Drew on the phone where the manager is making Chyna tell Dr. Drew all the drugs she's taken. And Dr. Drew is saying, well, you could die from that. But the manager's, well, it's an evil necessity right now just to get things done. What the Then the manager wanted to reunite her with her mother for the first time in 30 years on camera. But the mom cancels it the day before because she got a nasty email from Chyna. But then supposedly Chyna was upset that she wasn't coming. And then when she fires the manager says, you can't fire me. I'm not your manager. I'm your soulmate. These people should all be put in prison. Drug-addled mental cases taking advantage of a woman who's obviously got so many problems you can't even fucking write them all down.
Yeah, where did that soulmate thing come from him at the end?
Who the fuck knows? These are the lowest life fucking people I've ever seen. So WrestleMania weekend, she's a wreck. The director is high on heroin, asking her questions while she's having a meltdown. And the best help that they can get her is the manager says he called the TV show Intervention, and we've got them. They're scheduled to come a week from Thursday. Because it has to be TV. And the director canceled a meeting with her because he was sick on heroin, and so they have video that Chyna shot of herself playing the bass fiddle. This is a goddamn... It's not a cartoon because there's nothing funny about it. And then nobody hears from her, so the manager goes to her apartment with a cameraman following him, lets himself into her apartment, because he already, I'm pretty sure, knew what was going on, and he wanted the big fucking reveal, right? He wanted to be in the shot when they found her dead. Because you could tell when he was going in. And they had one of her former boyfriends who was pissed at this guy, said it was obvious what he was trying to do.
Yeah, that boyfriend was one of the guys on the crew. That was the guy saying it. But
no, I thought it was the other, the muscle head boyfriend.
Oh, that's right.
That was the musclehead boyfriend from her early bodybuilding days.
That was the ultimate sleazy move, though, because anyone out there, if you think about it, let's just say you happen to be making a documentary. You're Dallas Page. You're making a documentary following everyone around. If you even suspect that this person may not be alive, and you bring the camera crew to that point, that's sleazy. At some point, you got to turn around and go, hey, now's not the time. This is not going to get filmed.
No, he knew what he was going, because nobody heard from her in several days or a week or whatever. He knew exactly what he was going in for.
That's right.
And then he still put himself over at the finish of the thing. Her mother says he was supposed to spread half of her ashes, Chyna's, and give the other half to her mother. He gave half to her mother, spread a fourth of them, and kept a fourth of the ashes, put them in a bejeweled, rhinestone-covered urn, and showed it off at a stage show.
That footage of that memorial service was insane. What was that? With him front and center, like a preacher on that stage.
It's not often, ladies and gentlemen, out there in podcast land, that Brian Last and Jim Cornette can take the moral high ground. But these people should all be ashamed of themselves. Their mothers should curse them the day that she gave birth to them all. And did you read the final credits, the little updates on certain people at the end of the thing? The director was charged with possession and distribution of drugs, and everybody involved in this thing lost the rights and control of the documentary footage. And now it's been finished several years later by whoever the people were that put this together that weren't all criminals and psychopaths. Some people don't need to be in show business. Some people don't need to be famous. Some people can't handle the pressure. Some people don't need to. Obviously, none of these people needed to be in Chyna's life, from her alcoholic, drug-addicted father that stabbed her mother with a butcher knife, to the shit stain pumping her up full of shit, to Triple H using her as a gimmick and then fucking throwing her over for the billionaire princess, to these slimeball, drug-addled documentary filmmakers, to the goddamn manager, and on and on. But this was a perfect storm. This poor girl, and I say that while still saying rotten wrestler, but this poor girl should never have been involved in any of this, and somebody should have said, you know what, she just can't handle it. But
it's also about who you surround yourself with.
I prefer usually to not be surrounded. I've found that things are the easiest in my life when I am not surrounded, when I am instead off on an island somewhere unto myself. But surrounding yourself with the wrong people is worse than not surrounding yourself at all. But God almighty. And that's, so I feel bad
for her. That's the thing. She had that's the thing I felt really bad for. She had no one to turn to. I mean, I'm sure if she called up a few people for help, they would have done something, but she alienated herself from her sister. The thing with the mother was just completely insane to begin with. And then it's these three guys, the director who's on heroin, the whatever he was, the co-producer of the documentary, who ends up making these bizarre yoga videos with her on the beach.
Oh, yeah.
This manager, spiritual advisor, what a clown this guy was. What a piece of garbage this guy was. She had no one. She literally, at that point, and she's loaded on drugs. I feel really bad.
And, you know, and here's a cautionary tale, folks. Don't get into wrestling if you want to just be a star. Get into wrestling if you want to be a wrestler. Don't do anything just with the idea, I'm going to be a star. Because that's ridiculous and it will fuck your head up, especially if you don't get to be a star, which most people don't. But this may be screwy to you, but I honestly was already doing television as a manager my first or second week when I actually realized, shit, a lot of people are going to know who the fuck I am now. I'm on TV. I never thought about that part of it. I just loved wrestling so much, wanted to be around wrestling, watch wrestling, take pictures of wrestling, write articles about wrestling, ring announce wrestling. And then finally I said, you want to be a manager? Wow, I could do that. Okay. It was later on I realized, shit, I'm going to be on television. I never thought about the money, and I never thought about being a star, a quote-unquote star. When they broke me in Memphis, I thought that was going to be, and back then, managers stayed in territories for long periods of time. And I thought that I was actually going to be a manager in Memphis forever, or as long as they would let me, because I didn't think that anybody to ever want, why would anybody ever want me to go anywhere else? They've got their own managers. I'm not going to be as good as some of these guys, but I'll just do this here. And then it kind of crept up on me. But if you go into something with dreams of being a star, and the only reason you're doing that particular thing is just to be a star, chances are you're probably going to get disappointed, aren't you? I don't know. Anyway.
You come out of this seeing her a different way, though.
Yeah, I felt sorry for her. And I really did. And I mean, we never had it wasn't like she was a big, personality in the locker room and always telling stories and everybody sitting around listening to her. She was quiet and meek. We never had any major conversations, never had any harsh words, except when Triple H is the one that called and was mad at me because I stooged on her dentist appointment. But I just, it was just like, Jesus Christ, here's another person who has no background in the business, is probably not going to be very good at it, and is being pushed by Shitstain and these two juveniles. And that's why she was on my naughty list for a while. But seeing this, no, I had to feel sorry for her. She just should never been in the wrestling business. It exacerbated the problems that she already had. And then when they pumped her up to the point where she really believed that she was who she was supposed to be in the fans' minds, and she wanted millions of dollars and wanted to go out and do movies and whatever the fuck, and thought she was Wonder Woman, that was the worst thing that could have happened to her, because then she spent the next 15 years finding out she wasn't. And it wasn't ever going to get that good again. Anyway, not the dark side of the ring, but boy, the dark side of maybe they ought to do dark side of filmmaking and give us an update on this film crew, where what prison they're currently residing in.
Did you see they did announce another dark side? I saw it during one of the commercial breaks.
I know. Now, see, I guess we got to start calling Evan Eisner and Jason Husney. No, Evan Husney and Jason Eisner, we got to start calling them either the Road Warriors or the Rock and Roll Express. Because they got successful, and everybody in their chosen field is going to copy them ad infinitum until the end of time.
Hey, how long until Vice just becomes a 24/7 wrestling channel?
Well, they might as well have. And again, have you noticed the documentaries, the Hunt for Hidden Treasures, the Dark Sides of the Ring? They're doing as good or better ratings as almost any wrestling program on the air in America today. So that just shows you people want to hear more about the stars they used to watch than the ones that are foisted off on them today.
People still want to see the personalities. They just want to see them be real. They don't want to see them doing goofy skits and bad comedy.
Yeah, and then they show them the footage from 20 and 30 years ago of the shit they were doing that looked real, and the people, oh yeah, shit, that's great. You could do a working documentary with some of this footage and people wouldn't know the difference. Those promos back, especially like I was talking about earlier in the program, when Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart or Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes were jousting, there was an element of real fucking tension and sharpness in there. You could cut those statements up and put them in a documentary and people would be like, God damn, those guys hated each other. And all the old footage of the matches, it just shows grown adult men that looked like stars doing shit that looks like it hurts to other people against their will. So the matches looked better, the personalities were bigger, and the shit was more believable. So I think, documentaries on past wrestling are probably going to be the ratings hit of the future until the modern segment finally finishes the business off for good. And it's all either a computer-generated video game or a pro wrestling can be an intermission in the middle of a Cirque du Soleil program.
But there'll always be this business, the business of wrestling talk and the business of telling the stories and the documentaries, even when wrestling goes to complete shit, because we're not completely there yet. I would still want to see like a Tony Khan 25 years later, a Tony Khan and all these guys sit down and tell the real story, not the bullshit they're feeding Forbes.
In 25 years, these guys won't be able to remember the real story. They have too much CTE from diving head first out on their fucking noggins. But, I'm just telling you, everybody, you get older and you get wiser. You may lose a little hair along the way.
Hey, I'll tell you, Triple H, you see him in this documentary, the Chyna documentary, young, full head of hair.
Yeah. Golden mane, a golden god, like a rock star.
Now all that hair's on his chin. He didn't keep any of that hair from his head.
He didn't keep a bit of it. You know what he could have done? He could have kept a lot of it with our friends at Keeps. We've been talking about this. The folks at Keeps, Keeps.com, help you keeps your hair on your head. Because we all know this, and we've read the reports that most men will experience male pattern baldness, and there's really not much that most people can do about it, they say. But now Keeps offers a simple and stress-free way to keep your hair. You can not only keep what you got, but you can potentially get some of it back. The folks at Keeps, it's a low-cost treatment, start at just $10 a month. They offer generic versions of the great hair loss remedies. They've got more 5-star reviews than any of their competitors, and they send it to you in discreet packaging. None of that advertising that you're going bald so that the old woman next door can find out about it. No, folks, this is in a plain brown wrapper, but all you got to do is go to Keeps.com and read up on this stuff. It helps men keep their hair and prevent hair loss. It won't grow hair on a billiard ball. It won't reverse advanced baldness, but you can fill in some of the bare spots and you can keep what you've got already up there. Now, don't put it on your chin. It doesn't help with facial hair. And I've already tried it on my crotch, and because I wanted to use my manscaping products a little bit more often, but don't use it there. Put it on the top of your head. Anyway, if you go to Keeps.com, Keeps, Keeps, Keeps.com/JCE, you can get your first month of treatment for free. That's Keeps.com/JCE to get your first month's treatment for free. If you don't like the way your hair is starting to look, you need to keep more of it with Keeps.